Didn't think 6 Magnum shots was all she was going to take, right? Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Resident Evil T-Veronica X. In the last part, we played as Claire for a little bit, seeing the end of Steve before fighting Alexia as Chris. And now that we've gotten all 3 gyms, we've gotten behind the main room of the Spencer estate, essentially, to this secret lab. More on what this is right now. Code Veronica report. After many long years of research, I finally identified the inheritance element that administers the intelligence of man. I even succeeded in manipulating the absolute value of intelligence artificially by recomposing the base alignment of the element. I then sampled the gene of our great ancestor, manipulated its element, and implanted it into the unfertilized egg of a surrogate mother. What I didn't expect was that twins, a boy and a girl, were born. The boy had higher intelligence than normal, but not high enough for him to be considered a genius. However, the girl had unmatched intelligence that easily allowed her to be classified as a genius. She was exactly what I had been looking for, the revival of our great ancestor. I already determined their names. The girl's name, Alexia, and the boy's name, Alfred. I'm certain that Alexia will elevate the name of the Ashford family to extreme glory. Alexander Ashford. So the twins are eugenics babies. Great. Now, to not talk about that for a little bit while I go grab some items that are in Alexander's lab here, let's talk about Steve for a moment. Steve, I've talked about that I don't like him throughout, especially the first half of the game. I find he artificially lengthens the plot of Rockport Island just by doing dumb decisions. But to an extent, I get why he makes dumb decisions because, A, this game's not the best written in the series to begin with, but also, Steve's only 17. And there is an element that's like, we were all stupid at that age. We can't deny that much. But a lot of people harp on the relationship between Claire and Steve. I don't think she ever looked at him like that, like the way he looked at her. But there is definitely a camaraderie there because they're survivors going through traumatic events. There's always some amount of bonding that happens through that inherently. Plus, sometimes I tend to forget Claire isn't too much older than him. Even in the original Resident Evil 2, I think Claire is only like 19 or 20. And I don't think any of us could imagine going through this shit as a teenager, let alone as any kind of adult. So I kind of understand what they're trying to do with Steve here. Do I think he's well written? No. I think in general, from my memory of the game, he's much better written as a character in whichever Chronicles game he's in on the Wii, as I mentioned before. But I can at least appreciate the attempt of what they did. With that said, I definitely remember when I first played the game, letting out a little woo when he died, just because he did annoy me that much on my first playthrough. He's still annoying to me now, just not in a different way. With that said, Alexander's lab leads directly to where Claire was last part. So now not only can we use this item box to be a save room proper, but we also now have all 4 wing objects. So once we figure out where those go, we're going to be all set with that. Thus, the shotgun's going to become our main weapon for whatever zombies are left in the game. If you're playing along and you have as much handgun ammo as I have, you could also use that. But I'm interested in the instant kill nature of the shotgun on zombies at close ranges, more so than anything. Let's go see if we can check on Claire before anything else, though.
Claire? Is that you, Claire?
Chris?
No! The door won't open. Hey, is Steve with you?
Steve, he...
Listen, Claire. We have to get out of here immediately. Can you unlock it from the inside?
No, I can't. Chris, there should be a self-destruct system somewhere. If you activate it, all the electronic locks might be deactivated.
And Claire slides us the security file as an item, which is kind of weird, but inside of Free Check, it does have the security card. We need to go anywhere else at this point in time. And not for nothing. I talked about it a little bit earlier in the game. I don't find Code Veronica's soundtrack generally to be that memorable. I think its ambience is good sometimes, but the melodies aren't too great. From this point on, the end game is just filled with really good songs. This song right here, I'm not going to say its name because it's actually a little bit of a spoiler, but it's just a really nice theme. Has a kind of a somber tone to it, but also a very, like, we gotta do this, determined, I guess is the word I'm looking for, kind of theme. Compared to the rest of the melodies in the game, which aren't very... Well, they're not exactly more melody-based songs compared to a lot of Resident Evil music, like RE1 or especially RE2. It's just nice to have this again. With that said, we want to now come back through Alexander's lab to this section of the base. As, well, there's a couple of zombies in here, there's also a couple of herbs, but our main goal is the 2 doors that are in this Y-shaped hallway's top half. As they have some pretty key items for us. In particular, we do need to go through the door on the right first compared to the door on the left. Or no, I'm wrong. We actually have to go the opposite way. We have to go through the door on the left, then the door on the right. Because, this looks a little familiar, don't it? It's even got the music box again. The music box lid's closed. The blue sapphire has been removed. I'm guessing this is where Alexia and Alfred spent their childhoods before they eventually got moved elsewhere, like early study on them or some shit like that. But in Alexia's room, once again, there's a music box playing. Stop the music box. And once again, we have another ant. But the ants are here, period, in this base compared to Rockport Island, where the ants were entirely missing. However, you might notice the ants are missing their rear section. Again, I forget if that's the abdomen or the thorax. So we need to find gems that match that. Can you think of any gems we've seen over the past couple of videos? If you're thinking the tiger statue, you're correct. However, we need a different item to go grab those for right now, because the door that we need to get here is locked by electricity. If the power's out, which is the way we would be able to grab both those gems at once. But if we head into this office here, not only is there some shotgun shells as well as a first aid spray I actually don't grab right here. In a drawer here, there's a key that allows us to open the door from the Spencer Estate hallway, look-alike, to where that tiger statue is. Meaning there's now a way we can get around without having to rely on the power-based doors. This final section of the game is kinda weirdly backtrack heavy compared to the rest of the Antarctic base for Chris, because it's relatively not linear with him, but like smaller, not as backtrack heavy kind of deal. I suppose it is basically a smaller circle at the end of the day. There is something kind of funny to me about this final section of the game, though, in that it resembles Resident Evil 1 the most out of any portion of the game, I feel. Not only literally because of this Spencer Estate rooms that are just lifted right wholesale for this, but also I feel this is the way you circle around trying to make keys and doors work. I feel this is the most faithful feeling to the original Resident Evil portion of the game, which I guess it's a good way to go out. I like the climax of this game, the final boss themselves notwithstanding, because, oh boy, that boss fight is a pain in the ass. But this is also where I'd recommend you make a lot of final preparations for the final boss. Bring any magnum ammo you got, bring whatever weapons you want to bring some full heals. You're going to want some stuff to bring in. You're still going to want to have a few inventory slots open because I think we have one more relative trip to an item box before we're done. But this is where you can start making your final preps. And if you want to save, I'd really recommend saving. Because the final boss of this game, I'd say, is maybe the hardest final boss in any of the classic Resident Evils. The only one that maybe competes with it is maybe Resident Evil Zero's, but that's partially because, again, this and Zero are also the classic games in the series that aren't named Gaiden that I've played the least. So it's partially just a matter of inexperience. Although now I think about it, I guess Zero both has the buff and debuff of having 2 playable characters at once, so 2 inventories to manage, but also, like, potentially double the ammo storage, depending on how you lay it out. Zero's gonna be complicated when I inevitably get to that. With the power out, we can now go grab those tiger statue eyes and go put them back in Alfred and Alexia's rooms to handle this entire section. It was kind of a weird moment of bookending, too, now that I think about it, because not many games in the series, like, have you doing a section over like this, sort of, towards the end game. Unless you count just playing the game twice for, like, Resident Evil 2. So you're going to need at least 2 inventory slots to just do all this, which is why I left 2 inventory slots open. Weapons I could recommend for the end game, though. The shotgun's good for whatever zombies respawn, because the zombies towards Alexia and Alfred's room do respawn a couple times, even in this small section. But the Magnum should be saved specifically for the final bosses. If you have the bow gunpowder bolts, I recommend using that over the weapon I end up bringing. But if you don't have any of those left because you've used them all, I recommend acid rounds and grenade rounds. Flame rounds could be useful, but I think they just do less damage to the final boss than the others. Alright, you know what? That's one detail I like about this game as well. While you can't get pure headshots in the way Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, or Remake, and I think 0 do with them, you can at least shoot people's hats off with a proper headshot. And there's an element to that that's satisfying. I don't know why. You know, the way I talk about getting headshots in this series with the satisfaction it gives me, it makes you think that I like that kind of thing. I like horror movies, and I like horror games, but the moment I see any kind of blood in any kind of real life, I start getting sick. Hell, there's some horror movies I can't handle for that kind of stuff. Like, I like my movie gore to be more towards the absurd, not any kind of realistic. Like, 2 of my favorite horror movies are any of the Evil Dead trilogy and, like, Nightmare on Elm Street 3. So I like the weird shit in terms of the absurdity levels. Place in the red tiger eye, and we can grab ourselves the music plate. And now we can take this back to Alfred's room and do the same thing we did back at the Rockport Island mansion here. I always find it weird how eerily silent some of the games in this room get, because from memory at least, by and large, every room in the original trilogy had some form of, like, ambience going on. This might be the first time they go properly silent in some rooms. Unless there's some side room I'm forgetting about, which honestly there probably is. Now, this room is a moment I actually kind of like. In the mansion over on Rockport Island, we had that weird, like, playhouse room that ultimately became Alfred's study. But this room's a little different. Not only is there some shotgun and handgun ammo littered all over the place, as well as some more herbs. And I just realized you can also see the paintings of all the Ashford ancestors here, too. I never realized that. This is the room that we first technically got introduced to Alfred and Alexia in that video at the hidden armory room in the palace in Rockport Island, where we saw them tear the wings off that dragonfly. Speaking of which, look, a silver dragonfly key again. We have 4 wing objects. I wonder what we do. We now have the dragonfly object. That is a key you need in order to access the end of the game. And I am going to go place it, and I believe I place it next part, just based off the timeline of the video. But what I'd recommend doing, and I'm going to talk about this again at the start of the next part, is placing it and then going back to the nearest item box, just so you restock your inventory to the best of your ability. You can go into the room after you place the dragonfly object without like having to worry about a point of no return, and you can grab the 2 green herbs that are even in there. I just decided not to do that for backtracking reasons at that point. So now our goal is to go use the nearest item box to prepare ourselves for the end game properly otherwise, because once you input that dragon object and go into the next room and investigate a particular object, you are locked into the end game. It is kind of... it's weird. I feel the end game in Code Veronica kind of sneaks up on you in some regards, despite it being the longest classic game in the series. And I think the main reason of that is twofold. One, the Chris scenario is ultimately shorter than the Claire scenario, if memory serves. Yes, it's most of Disc 2, but it not happening directly at the split of the discs means that it feels shorter, no matter what. And also, I think a part of it's just due to Alexia. Alexia's talked about the entire game, but she's a relative non-entity in the story. Even after she gets introduced, you have like 2 or 3 cutscenes with her proper, including the one earlier this very video. But most of the game is spent with either Alfred as the villain or Wesker as the villain. Alexia just kind of exists in her own game's plot, sort of. And her just kind of transitioning into the mutated form and you fighting her there, it just kind of feels like it doesn't flow right, I guess. Like I said, Code Veronica, I think, is the weakest written out of all the classic-styled Resident Evils. As even the games that have some of the weirder shit in them, I'm looking at you, Resi Zero, have more present villains and a more developed narrative, I find. Mind you, it helps that I think those games have more cutscenes and don't rely as much on the notes and document way of storytelling, which is fine in general, but I feel like this game kind of gets a little overbearing with it. We'll talk more about that next part, though. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 17, we are heading off to Endgame to hopefully escape the Antarctic base and see the Redfields move on to live another day. See you guys then.